My guest today is Michael Llewelyn Barker, a film composer known for his evocative and immersive scores. A lifelong cinephile, Michael has an innate sense for the pace, rhythm, and emotional depth of a scene. He has led the music department on over 30 projects, including short films, feature films, and documentaries such as The Mourning Bird, one of my favorite films, What We Wish We Could Be, and Alasdair Mackay's debut feature, Anonymous. Now, he has a long running collaboration with the Academy Award winning production company Slick Films, working closely with director Chris Overton on multiple projects. Now, Michael regularly collaborates with world class session musicians and leading orchestras across the UK and Europe. Now, in 2020, Michael's compelling score for Those Last Moments won Best Original Score at the Paris Film Festival and the Imagine Rain Independent Film Awards, along with multiple nominations at many festivals and award ceremonies. Now, in 2024, Michael won Best Original Song, Aiden's Song, performed by West End star Jamie Moscato, and was nominated for Best Original Score at the International Sound and Film Music Festival for his work on What We Wish We Could Be, directed by Luke Shelley. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome music composer extraordinaire Michael Llewelyn Barker to the show. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Ward. Very happy to be here.
Well, how old were you when you got interested in music?
Wow. Um, I think actually it begins with film, actually. So the first music I ever really remember hearing was John Barry's James Bond scores, and that's just that and things like um, The Adventure of Robin Hood, which that's one of those very old films from the golden age of Hollywood with a score by Corn Gold, Blackbeard the Pirate, things like that, and so the first music I remember hearing was film music, and it's something that always stayed with me for I must have been 5 or 6 when I saw those films for the first time.
Well, in the beginning, did you learn a musical instrument when you were a kid?
Um, I was a bit of a late developer actually. My my mum's uncle, so my great uncle, was actually he was brilliant. He really loved George Gershwin, and he played like George Gershwin. And he had a Bechstein baby band, and he used to live in this nice little cottage, and the grand piano was next to a big window overlooking his garden, and that's that I have very clearly. And I used to dabble on that, but never really seriously. And then when I became a teenager, I started playing guitar and writing songs in rock and roll bands.
So, when did you actually start composing your own music?
Um, I think pretty much as soon as I started playing guitar, I think I started writing. Um, it sort of coincides with like me first picking up guitar coincides with I received as a Christmas present a thing, a box set of demos by Pete Townsend, Lifehouse Chronicles. Lifehouse was what it was was to be a big rock opera, which was abandoned, and some of the songs from that became Who's Next. And that box, like the demos from that, they're incredible, all performed by him on every instrument, and they're very much like not too far away from what recordings were. I mean, obviously he doesn't play drums like Keith Moon or bass like Entwistle or sing, but the songs are there, were complete. And I thought, man, if you can do that sort of stuff by yourself naively, I thought, why can't I?
I,
so really came at the same time. I went and bought like a little 4-track tape recorder, and that sort of set me off on my journey.
so, what was the first film that you ever scored, And how did that collaboration happen?
Well, um, it had always been my intention. I was done playing in bands when I was too old for that kind of thing. I was going to, I always felt like what I wanted to do was write music for film. And the band was sort of coming to its natural end. It was dying a bit of a slow death. And I made the decision to move to London. I'm from Stoke-on-Trent in the Midlands. Okay, so I made the decision to go to university. I was a bit older than when most people go to. I was like 25, I think, and study music. Not really with a strong idea of what I was going to do the other side of. I'd like to think of it as a sort of thinking holiday, if you know what I mean. So I went, and it was just to buy myself a couple of years where I can decide what I wanted to do. And it was just, when I was there, I decided that actually, why don't I give it a go? And through that course, I hooked up with some people on the animation course and did She's Mine with Michael Greg Hayworth, which was a sort of dark comedy, really good actually, and I had the opportunity with that. We workshopped it with professional orchestra, so it was the first time I'd ever heard my music played by musicians of sort of that kind of caliber. And it was an incredible experience. It was over too quickly, and all I thought afterwards was like, I want to do it again.
So what is your favorite film score that is not your own?
Well, like I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a huge John Barry fan, particularly his like 60s things like the Chris File and lots of the Bond films. I hesitate to choose just one of those. So, although if I was pushed on it, I'd probably go for Anima Secret Service. But then, Blade Runner is a big one for me. Completely different, and that's where a lot of the electronic influence on me comes from. And then James Newton Howard's Fugitive. Actually, I think so. I can't say just one, but there's well, if you include all John Barry's
Yeah,
scores.
there's just so many composers out there that have left their mark on film. But for you,
Yeah.
what is your process of scoring a film?
Well, I try to stay away from the computer as much as I can. So yeah, I find the computer just the sort of the least conducive place to be actually being really creative and thinking about human stories. So I like to, depending of course on how stage project I'm brought in. If it's early enough, I can read the scripts and look at storyboards, and if the film's shot, get a look at some of the rushes that they've done, and then I'd like to sort of let it sit with me in my mind and work out themes, and the harmonic language at the piano, writing it out by hand, just to sort of, really get inside the music and the characters and the story of the film. And I also do a lot of sort of messing around on this stuff behind me, creating sounds to sort of develop the world, that's the palette that is going to be the film. And then once I do get the sort of, I can't really say locked picture, because are they ever really locked these days? But when it's close to being a final version, that's when I then put it into the computer and then start bringing all of those things that I've been working on together.
So, do the directors give you some idea as to what they are looking for, or do they just leave it up to you?
It depends, really. A lot of the people I work with like Chris or Luke, we have quite a long-standing relationship, so they did kind of trust me to sort of get on with it, and at least in the first instance, give them what my thoughts are before then they start giving me their ideas. But if it's someone I haven't worked with before, I fully understand that films, have temp music and things like that. So and I'm happy to go along with that.
Well, I want to talk about the music score that you did for one of my favorite short films, What We Wish We Could Be. Now, the music
Yeah.
alone enhanced the whole story of the film. It's a very serious film, and your score was incredible. So tell me how that came to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, it had to be that way, didn't it? Because I think music is at its heart. Aidan is a music lover, and it's where he gets his strength from. So if you failed on delivering a score to match, then you really have failed in your job. I remember quite clearly, actually. This is back in October 2023. I received a message from Luke. I'd done a film with him before, postponed. And I received a message from Luke just saying, "Are you up for going for a beer on Thursday?" That was, I had the feeling he was going to ask me to do What We Wished We Could Be, because I knew he was working on it. So I had that feeling. So, obviously, of course, and we went down, we went to the, like I say, this is all very quite vivid in my mind. We went to the Star and Garter in Soho, and he asked me to do the music for What We Wish We Could Be. And then the second point that he had was that it had this song in it, which he explained to me about how that had come about, and he asked me, how I felt about doing it. And I was, I'd say I never say no to anything, initially at least. So, I had two questions, basically, well, is the song, because the song had been written by some friends of his, and, I asked, is it any good? And he said, well, you can hear it. So he gave me his phone, and I went outside. The pub was very busy at this point. It was, on a Thursday evening, so it was packed with people who just finished work. So I went outside, put his earbuds in, and listened to it, outside. And I went back in and said, okay, yeah, I can see how this can work in the context of the film. And the second question is, can you act or sing? And he was like, well, he comes from a musical theatre background, so no problem with that. See Jamie Moscato, who's an incredible singer.
Well, it was that
So,
scene in the film, the black and white scene with Jamie singing, and you wrote that song?
well, no, it was written by New Coast. My job was to arrange it in a way that Jamie could sing it on set, because it sort of, I think the idea of it is that it's his favourite song of the moment, and when he performs it, he's in a dream world, escaping the problems that he's got with his life in reality. So he sings the song then. So I arranged that version for a big sonic string section. It was quite, it presented some quite unique challenges actually, because I think the film was going to be shot about 2 weeks later. We didn't have much time. Jamie was on holiday as well, so we had no chance to rehearse this. So I basically, as soon as I got back, I began work on putting together a backing track for him, so I could get it to him as quick as possible, so we could at least hear it. And we did that. I we sent it to him. He sent us a demo back that he recorded on his phone to my sort of backing track that he'd done in his flat on his phone. And I could immediately hear that it was all going to be fine. You know, Luke was still quite anxious about it because obviously, we've none of us have ever done any of that, like anything like this before. And he was shooting it on film, so I think he had it in his mind that he's not got unlimited amount of takes to do this. We've probably got 3 or 4 at the very most, so it's going to have to be good. And he was quite committed to the idea that we would use the live vocal that Jamie recorded on set rather than then going back and re-recording it in a studio.
I think that's what made that whole scene organic, because Jamie sang the song on set, and I remember talking to Luke and Jenna about that film, because the color version and the black and white were both 35 millimeter. And the black and white was true black and white film. It was not converted in post. And to see Jamie sing that song, I mean, it was breathtaking to watch. And
let me tell you a story. Because like I say, we had no chance to rehearse it. The first time we did it, we got to we were filming in a nightclub a nightclub that used to be a warehouse in East London. It was November, absolutely freezing cold, every morning, and we'd still had never done it properly. So Jamie arrived, and Luke, sound recordist, me and Jamie went to this little back room to do it for the first time. We were all so nervous, and he started singing, and it's one of the most magical experiences of my life. Honestly, it was like Luke had tears coming down his face. I remember, like, we finished, and I just joked to Jamie, consider yourself hired.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think it's one of probably the most incredible scenes in short films. And people who have never seen it need to watch What We Wish We Could Be, because that film should have gone on to be Oscar qualified, if not Oscar shortlisted. And again, it's still one of my favorite films. And it has to do a lot with not just the storyline, but the music had a big play in that. Now, there's a short film this year, Plastic Surgery, has been making the rounds across the film festival circuit, but the music score for this film ended up being 8 individual pieces of music. Explain that.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I would say that, because it's all it all comes from the same idea, basically. And as I said, I was introduced to Guy. Sophie, who was the producer on What We Wished, is also the producer of Plastic Surgery, and she introduced me to Guy, recommended me to do the score for it. And as I mentioned earlier, this was quite early on in the project. I can't remember if they just finished shooting or they were about to, but I explained it to me, and it sounded very exciting. And once again, I convinced that it was worth spending a bit of money and going and do it for real with a live orchestra. So again, I came up with some ideas for that. The first thing I wrote, we didn't use in the final cut of the film. Guy liked it, and and I still really like it. Lots of the synth elements and some of the percussion parts do directly come from that, but it just didn't quite work for the film for me. So we started again, and it's one of those things. I just sat at the piano and just put my hands on it, and in sort of the wrong place, if you know what I mean, and just started going down, just started playing this thing, and it was a bit weird. And I thought, actually, I think this is where we want to go with this. And basically, the score practically all comes from that one idea. It's obviously inverted, turned upside down, back to front, and varied, but it all comes from that same place, really.
Well, how many times are you watching a scene to get the idea, the vibe, maybe the feel to write the score?
Well, because I do quite so much work before sitting down with a film, like coming up with developing the relative sounds and developing the themes and what have you. Once I do sit down to actually write music to picture and put it all together, I've generally got quite I think mostly I pretty much know what I'm going to do, so it doesn't take me that long. And obviously you do go, have bits and back and forth, making, perfecting it, making sure all the timings absolutely bang on, but not too much. I think we wrote Plastic Surgery in about 5 days, something like that.
Wow. Now, do you sit down with the editor and post?
Not on this occasion, didn't. I think I was given the second to final cut, and it, I just wrote it. Guy and we obviously did the spotting session and decided where music was going to be, and there was a 10 track on there with. I think you've spoken to Guy about this, haven't you? I think.
Yeah,
I can't remember. It was
I know. Yeah, I know. I talked to Guy about it.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was Interstellar or Inception, one of those two. But that was
he
mentioned
Interstellar. That's right.
Yeah.
So he was kind of
that was
he wanted. I guess he wanted that feel that Interstellar gave.
Yeah, I think so. He certainly wanted something quite big and quite a proud feeling.
Yeah, yeah. So let me ask you this, because you have scored so many films. Which film would you say was your biggest challenge to score, and why was it a challenge?
Well, have you seen Mourning Bird? Maybe you haven't. That was one done with that was from Slick Films in 2022. George Sommer directing. Really, really nice, little short, beautifully shot. Brilliant performances in there. It's about knife crime in London, so a very important subject. And it was George's first time directing, and the editor had temped it with a Neil Fromm track, which George had basically fallen in love with, and it was one of these scenarios. I'm not the sort of composer I'm not going to copy off a temp track ever. I want to put my own stamp on these things, and so that was the challenge. Really, was basically convincing George that what I was doing was the way to go, and the Niels Fromm, if you really want that, you should probably try and license it. But in the end, we got there, and I think I think the score is actually really strong in the end, and it won best original score at British Short Film Awards. So we got there in the end, and George was happy with it.
Well, and that's all that really matters is getting there at the end, but to have it become an award winner, that just that's the
Yeah.
cherry on top. I've watched some of the videos. So, what's it like recording with the Budapest Scoring Orchestra?
Well, as um, recording with any kind of professional player or ensemble is, if you're a composer, that's, it's the reason why you do these things. For me, music isn't ones and zeros, and it really comes alive when it's performed. That's when it develops its real soul. So it's incredible. They're incredible players. Again, of course, short, we've got huge budgets we don't have all day, so they do these things in literally 2 or 3 takes, sight reading it, seeing it for the first time, and it's an amazing experience.
Yeah, because the pieces of music are very short when it comes to, let's say, you're scoring a short film.
Yeah, it's not often. I mean, what we wish we could be is one of those sort of exceptions to that, where you've got a 3-minute song in there. But often you're sort of looking at keys of a minute to about 30 seconds up to 2 minutes long at the maximum normally.
Well, so how far in advance do you have to book an orchestra?
Well, because of budget constraints, the Budapest do shared sessions which have a certain, they're done on a certain day, and there'll be a few composers going in on that same day and doing it, and that means that you're able to boot them for an hour or two as opposed to a whole day. So it makes these things a lot more affordable. So really, you are at the mercy of when they're doing it. So you do have, if you are going to do it, you do need to sort of factor that in.
So, what's the
But
largest orchestra that you have ever used?
I think I think the one. Well, both What We Wish and Plastic Surgery were both done with like 40 string section, and the piece I did with it at university was a chamber orchestra, so it was more, yeah, it was full orchestra, but with less amount of players, so probably about 30 in total, but that had all brass and woodwinds and things like that. So yeah, probably the 40-piece strings.
Well, all I know is that in the end, the music comes out so beautiful with all of the films that you have scored. And I noticed that in 2022, you released a 4-song EP called Hinterland. What was the inspiration behind those songs?
Well, um, I was having one of those quiet periods. But, I didn't have much work on, and I was just sort of, I'm going to have to do something basically. And I was actually on holiday when sitting on the beach when I first came up with the idea for the piece Hinterland. So then I had that in my mind, and I kind of tried to sort of notate it with having no access to any pianos or any instruments. And then obviously as soon as I got back, I went and worked it up properly. But it's I at the time it was my idea that I was going to go and do a full album, but it's just I find it difficult, like I find much easier, collaboration and having a brief to work on. So if I if somebody asked me to write for their film, like I say, I find it actually quite easy to write film scores. But then when I try and sit down and write things for myself, I've got a blank page, and I think, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, because you don't really know the end result when you're trying to do something for yourself. You know that when you're working on a project for somebody else, you know where it's going. So to
Yeah,
Let's say,
exactly. And you've only got a limited amount of time to do it, and you can't just say I can't think of what to do here. That's not an acceptable position.
well, how many films do you have in the pipeline now that you're scoring?
Well, July and August have been incredibly busy, and I'm about to go on holiday next week. So I just delivered 3 scores last week. I've got, yeah, one definitely in the pipeline, and then they'll. I'm hoping to avoid it whilst I'm on holiday, but you know how these things work. I may well end up doing it. And then after that, there's a few interesting things. Um, a couple of feature length projects, which I can't really say much about. Apart from one Luke's feature film, which he did give me say I was allowed to say that we're doing that, but that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Feature films are usually kept under wraps for quite a while. Short films, not so much. So I completely
Yeah.
get that. So, how did you end up doing multiple collaborations with Chris Overton and Slick Films?
Well, that's a was a funny story, but so back in and I'd like I think it was 2021. Really deep in COVID, and I was basically sending emails around, looking for work, and I I'd sent an email to a filmmaker who I noticed um, came from like where close to where I come from. So I'd mentioned that in my email to him, and then I a couple of weeks later I saw something about Chrissy's a film that Slick were doing called Please Care, I think it was. And I thought that sounded interesting. So I sent another email and I accidentally copied the thing about where I'm from this email into this email. And a few minutes later, Chris emailed me back saying, "Oh, my wife and I are from Stoke." Yeah, just I didn't know, and it was a complete coincidence, and that sort of obviously triggered a bit of a connection. So um, he sent me a link to it. He's got a big data, a form that feeds into a big database of freelancers that he uses. He just asked me to fill that in, and I didn't really hear anything for probably it might have even been close to a year actually. And then I had a voicemail from Becky, who was producing Leader, and she basically said, "Chris really wants to work with you. Um, can you give me a call back?" So, and that's how it began.
So, how many films have you done with Slick now?
uh, 9, I think. Mm,
And all the
yeah.
scores are fantastic.
So, thank you.
Yeah,
You know, the honestly, when if I get an email from someone saying that I'm working with Slick, Chrissy's recommended you, I never think twice about I'm going to say yes to. I always the standard of films that they make is I think I don't think there's another company in the UK that consistently makes such great films as Slick do, short films as Slick do. So like I said, I don't even really need to ask what it's about or how much money's involved. I just will always say yes to them.
yeah. You sound like
That makes
me.
me yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, with Chris, the whole team at Slick, they are on a whole nother level when it comes to producing, directing, and creating these short films. There is just, and you probably will agree with me, there is just this feel. There's this look that these films have. It's almost like they have their own signature, don't they?
Yeah, well, they won't let anything substandard past. I promise you.
Yeah, I don't think substandard is in their vocabulary over
No,
at Slick. So, and I know Chris will appreciate that we're talking about him. But so, Michael, again, I have listened to a lot of these film scores. I've listened to your four-song EP, and you just have an incredible talent. You have the incredible ear when it comes to scoring films. You bring forth so much emotion to all of the scenes that you have written scores for, and I just can't wait to see what you do next.
yeah, thank you. I'm always looking forward to the next film, and working on, new things and trying different things and trying to find, a own path, um, on this journey.
Yeah, it's so, ladies and gentlemen, if you are a filmmaker or you're looking for one of the best composers in film, then you need to check out Michael's website at mlbarker.com for his music. And again, if you're looking for someone to score your film, I'm sure he'll be happy to discuss your project with you. So, Michael, I want to thank you so much for sharing some of your background and a few of your film scores with me today.
Thanks, Ward. Yeah, great. Yeah, really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, you can catch all of the Bond on Cinema interviews at bondoncinema.com. Check out our Prime show, our YouTube channel, and you can listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Audible, and more. And remember, you're either going to see me at the movies or on the red carpet.